This winter, the total failure of 30 years of successive UK governments is being exposed. They blame it on the Ukraine war, but that is just an excuse. The Ukraine war has increased our energy prices, yes, but only because we exposed ourselves to it. It's because continuous governments for the last 30 years have followed a totally unworkable green policy that has cost you a fortune and has made things much worse. They stopped building nuclear. They did away with gas storage. They wasted billions on biomass and prevented fracking. And if you want clear evidence all these policies were wrong, then just look at the new policies today as they try to reverse as fast as possible some of those big mistakes. Now trying to build nuclear as fast as they can. Now pleading to get the gas storage they closed in 2016 back. Now backsliding on the insane biomass programme, but still preventing fracking whilst trying to import frack gas from the USA. Today, when the wind stops, as it can for many days if not weeks, then without gas we do not have enough storage to run the power grid for even 1 minute. Wind farms have made us totally dependent on gas, because when the wind turbines stop, they don't just stop killing birds, they stop the supply of electricity, and we become much more dependent on gas. In fact, we have to build a megawatt of gas supply for every megawatt of wind power installed. This costs a fortune, and is just one of the factors that make wind power so very expensive. They lead you up to a utopian heaven of net zero that is destroying the entire economic base of the West and makes no difference at all to CO2 levels. The entire net zero hype lives in the world of unicorns. Net zero simply has to be dropped. The CO2 content of the atmosphere is measured on top of a mountain in Hawaii, and this is the internationally agreed CO2 curve. What it shows is that when you plot all the COP meetings, all the climate meetings onto it, they make no difference whatsoever to the growth of CO2. So all the politicians claiming what they're doing at COP, what they did in Glasgow, what they're about to do in Egypt, etc., has no meaning at all. All they managed to do is increase the CO2 a bit by putting all the private jets into the air to go to the meetings. No effect at all. And the reason is that China and India and places like that carry on with coal, etc., expanding it regardless. For example, the IPCC agreed with China in the Paris Agreement that China and India and places like that could carry on increasing their CO2, carry on with coal until 2030. And only then did they have to start. So it's a lie to pretend that these COP meetings make any difference at all. In fact, this universally accepted graph here shows we are actually accelerating the rate at which we put CO2 into the atmosphere. We're now up to 2.5 parts per million added per year. And as you can see here, it has just grown from decade to decade to decade. Just look at the CO2 output of China. Look how that's growing here. And the USA, that's been dropping. So why did the USA drop? Well, it dropped because they went in for fracking, which is a much cleaner form of energy and much cleaner gas. You couldn't make this story up, but that growth in China and India, etc., it's decimating industry in the West. In China, domestic users pay just 6.5 pence a kilowatt. Today, I'm paying a subsidised 33 pence a kilowatt. And of course, the actual industrial price of 7.6 pence a kilowatt is going on for 15 times smaller than industry pays in the West. But don't expect any rational logic from the extreme protesters such as Stop Oil They don't target the Chinese or Indian. They allow them to build as much coal power plants as they want, whilst targeting the very infrastructure of the West. It's total madness. Throughout the UK and the rest of Europe, our industries are being decimated, and for no good reason whatsoever. You know, CO2 has a logarithmic scale, and so as you actually add more of it, it has less and less effect. You can see this on the graph here. Let's increase the CO2 enormously from today's value of about 420 right up to 600. And you can see here the difference it makes with effect. The effect it has is very, very little. Not that it matters anyway, because CO2 is not the main driver of the climate. It's politics that drives the agenda today, not science. We even allow our enemies to interfere with our political processes, and for example Putin to spend millions on spreading false information about fracking so him and his cronies could stop it in the UK and the rest of Europe. How mad can we be? Well, having seen that the COP meetings make no difference, that the world is just simply, totally mad on the green agenda, and we're not achieving anything, the science is not there for it, let's just take a look at what our current politicians in the UK are doing. And what they are doing is putting you lower in their priorities than net zero, despite the fact their policies on net zero make no difference whatsoever to the outcome, and are actually impossible to achieve. The Emperor really does have no clothes on. And it's about time the population of the UK saw it for what it is. Today in the UK, we have a Prime Minister who changes his policies depending on which way the wind is blowing, clearly campaigning for the leadership on the grounds of supporting fracking. As soon as he was in power, he changed that, but then he changed many other policies within the first week of being in power. A quote from Sunak: "Climate change will ravage your planet without urgent action. There is absolutely no evidence of this whatsoever." And another quote: "More important, because every moment we allow climate change to ravage our planet, we will see more human suffering, like the devastating floods in Pakistan." So he's relating individual floods, weather, to climate change. You cannot do that. And if you actually looked into the history of floods in Pakistan, the floods in the past were far more devastating. But science and facts no longer matter. Just take a look at this graph. The facts are that the past climate on Earth was far more devastating than the benign climate we have today. Yes, we have disasters and we always will, but we have to put them into perspective. And if you look at this graph, you can see that climate-related deaths are at the lowest they've ever been in history. But apparently, we're supposed to be devastated by the ravaging of climate today. This is a world of make-believe, a world of control through fear. Even if you look at total natural disasters, in this graph, again, the lowest they've ever been. With absolutely no understanding of the facts, no understanding of the science, our leaders are just ruining our economy and costing you a fortune. In the UK here, we have a fanatic called Michael Gove, whose job it is to level up. He's called the Levelling Up Minister, and the levelling up means trying to level up the economy in underdeveloped areas. And so the previous Prime Minister came up with these zones where they encourage, with low tax incentives, etc., industry to come and develop employment there and an economy there. So what does he do? Straight away, he declares that that is less important than climate change, than net zero. Nothing must get in the way of net zero. We have to change our government. And by the way, don't consider for one moment that any of the mainstream parties actually have a different policy. In fact, all of them are worse than the Conservatives. There is not a single party in our Parliament that supports a sensible agenda. They are all green fanatics. That has to be changed. For the record, I have decided not to join any political parties because I wish to campaign on my climate realism message and not be interfered with any pressures in politics. I am willing to give talks for any party that supports the agenda I'm promoting. I do not make a single cent from this campaigning that I do. In fact, I subsidize it heavily. I am simply doing it to give a better world to my grandchildren. Now let's take a look at this winter. As you freeze this winter, ask yourself why we may have power cuts. As our national grid rehearses 4-hour and 7-day power cuts for this coming winter, understand it all rests on pure luck. A winter high-pressure event stops the wind and increases energy demand. We all know those still winter frosty days when the temperature plummets, and that is all we need to cause a crisis. This, in what's meant to be a highly developed country. They continue to ban fracking that could provide us with a plentiful supply of cheap gas. Just 10% of the estimated gas reserves in our Bowland Hodder shale field would give us enough gas for the whole of the UK for 50 years. A ban not based on engineering fact, but on the ignorant beliefs of the Green Movement. The banning reason is earthquakes. Somehow the UK is going to be devastated by earthquakes if we frack. So let's look at, again, simple facts. In the UK, we have hundreds of earthquakes every year. Fracking has a limit of 0.5 on the Richter scale. You cannot even feel that, yet it is the limit for fracking, making it impossible to frack. Just look at this table from the British Geological Survey, frequency of occurrence of UK mainland earthquakes. So here we are. We have some earthquakes every 8 years of 5 and higher. So at 1 to 1.9, we have about 2 earthquakes a week. So how many do we have at 0.5? Well, the answer is thousands. Earthquakes or tremors measuring below 3 on the Richter scale are rarely felt on the surface and require sensitive surface or special listening equipment buried at depth to measure. It is a logarithmic scale. Hence 0.5 is over 1,000 times less than the unobserved level that has just been explained of 3. In the UK, the allowed tremor is 3,162 times less than that allowed in the USA, making it impossible to frack. In the UK, we have countless earthquakes of 0.5 or so every day. You cannot even feel one over 1,000 times stronger. The fracking limit needs to be lifted to 2.5. The hysteria has to stop. All it is going to take this winter is a high over the UK and the rest of Europe. And that's it. We're going to have high demand for power and no wind. The pigeons are now coming home to roost as the government scrambles to increase nuclear and even coal power, as well as to open the gas storage they closed down. Germany is even knocking down a wind farm so it can expand a coal mine that mines dirty brown coal. This is clear evidence that we simply have to see of the failure of Western governments. But the UK is not alone in this stupidity. Almost all the Western world has embraced the same policies, whilst at the same time effectively banning debate on the subject. An entire generation has been brainwashed. So let's look at the plans the power grid has for us this winter. They actually plan to pay industry and you not to use electricity, just like we pay wind farms not to switch on. Children could have done a better job in managing our energy policies. They also plan to rely on agreements to import power from Europe. But the world has changed. Let us examine that for, say, Norway, our main supplier of gas. Because of its topography, Norway has a lot of hydroelectric power and relies on it quite a lot for its power supply. But this year, the reservoir levels in Norway have gone through a fairly dry period, and as a result, the levels are not as they would have hoped. They have therefore issued a warning to us, to the UK, that they may not be able to supply all the gas we want. France has run down its nuclear base, and France actually expects us to support them. The power grid is guilty of wishful thinking. All you can do is hope. But that alone is a major failure of government, and yet the policies of all the main political parties is to make the situation worse. Much worse, not better. There is no climate emergency. They are using weather events to scare you. Weather events such as droughts and storms that have actually decreased over the last few hundred years. Islands have grown rather than sink, and polar bears are at record numbers. None of the doom and gloom predictions have been right. Not one. Einstein said, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of the truth, and he was right. It is not up to government to decide what's good science and bad science. They're lousy at it. Nor is it up to the BBC. Michael Crichton, I quote, historically the Cambridge consensus has been the first refuge of scoundrels. It is a way to avoid debate by claiming that the matter's already settled. Whenever you hear the consensus of scientists agrees on something or other, reach for your wallet because you're being had. COP16, it's the last chance. COP17, no, really, this is the last year. COP18, well, it really is our very last chance. COP19, no, it's this year. COP20, no way, no, now. COP21, sorry, but this is the very, COP22, now look here, this is our last chance ever. And COP23, the science is settled. This is the last one. COP24, la, not listening, this is it. COP25, okay, we were joking before, but now we're serious. COP26, maybe no, I'm 97% certain. And COP27, this is our last best chance to fool you.